And welcome back to Miniature Dragon Comic Review, coming to you live from Seattle, Washington. As always, I'm your host for the evening, Daniel Doc Gentry. And with me is half of our gurus from Miniature Dragon Comics, Woody, and Alex is at a booth because they're at Comic-Con down at Central City, or over at Central City Comic-Con, I should say, from where we are, from Seattle, Washington. And thanks for joining me. Hi, Woody.
Hey, yeah, we're here in Ellensburg, Washington, the glorious college town.
What college is in Is that the Crimson one? Washington State?
I should know this. Nerd, so I wasn't thinking. This show was usually in Yakima, but for some reason they moved it over here.
Okay, well.
Yeah.
Just let you know your sound's going in and out a little bit tonight, and we want to just give an apology for that. It's really hard sometimes when they're out on Comic-Cons to do the show, but we want to bring it to you as best as possible. Today we're going to be talking about Heroes in Crisis #1 from DC Comics, and What If the X-Men #1 from Marvel. So I like how you mixed that up. Why don't we just go ahead and get started and jump into Heroes in Crisis?
Cool. We're saving the good book for last. Heroes in Crisis... I'm not sure exactly like where this one fits into the DC timeline, but it basically appears to be basically focusing on superheroes with PTSD and some sort of a location that was set up so that they could be safe to hang out and heal. But there's a Superman, Wonder Woman, and Batman. The Trinity show up to find that everybody there has been killed. Most of the characters, are just no-name people that are minor characters, some of which you never even heard of, but yet the Wally West Flash seems to have been killed. Like the entire 20 characters are killed, and it's a really well written story, but it makes me wonder because I know Wally West is alive in the Flash, so where this falls into the continuity, I don't know. But there's some really interesting, gruesome imagery, and I hope that it has stakes. As I was reading it, it's like, oh great. Everybody dies. Nobody we care about. Then suddenly the Flash is dead. What? So, what do you think of the book, Doc?
Well, I found it kind of interesting. Not the setup, because I know that's set up with all the people dying and stuff like that. I did think it was an interesting concept having them talk about their problems, and one of them was a junkie. One of them just how do you handle blah blah blah, and then you see. Familiar people like Harley Quinn in there, and a couple of those pictures are going to pop up, and like what he was saying, you see these characters they had really weird cameos, or me personally, I was most of the time I never even seen the person before.
Yeah, well, the one who was a junkie, that's actually a callback to a significant story where he used to be Speedy, the sidekick to Green Arrow, and they had this big, really edgy storyline that challenged the comics code, where it's like, oh no. Speedy's a heroin addict, and the Green Arrow is like, oh my god, is this my fault? I've taken this young kid into danger, and this is what happens. And that kind of stuff. Sorry, there's flies everywhere. The one though that got me is Superman's coming in. You see this close up of a crow eating something on the ground, and you see this tiny little mask in his mouth with some gory shit. And then later on, you find out it's some shrinking superhero that can't control his powers. It's like, oh my god, that's horrific.
It was pretty messed up. Yeah, I got that one too.
Very, very messed up. Arsenal. See, the thing is, Arsenal's there. He's actually a significant. I wouldn't call him an A-list hero, but he's definitely he's a Teen Titan character. Mm-hmm. So he's kind of a big deal. You got the Wally West Flash, who is an A-list character, and they've got some of the characters. I know you've never heard some of these guys, but some of the characters in that list are major DC mainstays. So I kind of wonder how much is this a story that's even going to have any stakes at the end? Because you need Wally West. They made a big deal about bringing him back, and then only a year later they killed him off. So, something's fishy here. Something is really fishy here.
Well, remember, if you don't like the story, it's an alternate universe.
Right? He is very good about that. It's like, oh, you don't like it? Okay, it's out of continuity. Oh, you like it? Okay, it is.
Like what they did with Star Wars when they took all the canon and said, it's not canon anymore, it's now Legends.
Right. Well, that's the whole reason how Barbara Gordon became Oracle when the Joker paralyzed her in an Elseworld story, and they're like, oh, you like that? Okay, fine, permanent. It's now in, So, yeah, it's the thing is, it was a really well written story. well executed. It's probably one of the best written DC books I've seen in a long time, and it clearly comes from a really genuine, creative place. And somebody obviously had a good pitch for a book. It wasn't just editorial. It was like, write this shit. It's like, somebody had a pitch. So I think it's a good book. It's just, I think it kind of stinks of, the same problem of superhero comics at the big two. It's like, these characters are not going to stay dead. Most of those characters will, because nobody gives a damn about them. But I know for a fact 2 of those characters are coming back, if they're even dead at all. But the interesting thing is in the story, there's kind of this implication with the engagement between Harley Quinn and Booster Gold. When they were fighting, that Harley seems to be implying that Booster Gold killed everybody. And they ended on a really for a mystery to really suck you in. Okay. And, the book's hitting it's checking all the boxes, I will say. And they're doing it well.
So, judging like we always do on my 3 Matrix, we'll start off with, I agree with you 100% about the story.
Yeah.
The story was incredible. It was a lot of fun. And I gotta say, in the past, I've not been a big DC fan, but it seems like lately there's a shift in DC. And I hope it continues, because it's starting to draw me back in. I'll be honest with you. Even with using some of the old characters, knowing that they can't die, the stories are getting more interesting, I guess is the best way to put that. Even though, that very few people are actually going to be on the line, even though they've done some stuff recently. The Death of Superman, or bringing that back from the old Death of Superman, but a real Death of Superman. And then, what that meant for the comics, and then, translating that into the movie, which I thought, from when I looked at the comic, that was not a bad translation. I wasn't a big fan of the movie, but the comic book to the movie was not a bad translation. It's probably my bias. I don't like Ben Affleck as Batman. Well, I do, now that I've actually given it a chance, but I had that
Ben Affleck as Batman, by the way. He reminds me of Keaton.
He's really good. I'm going to admit it. But the art in this is actually really well done. And what I mean by that is, it's like a mashup of what they've done lately with some of the characters, and they've integrated some of the look of the movie, and with the Harley Quinn character. But they did it in such a way that it's a little bit more unique. It's not just that. Like, the personality is even different, but it's got that same connection, which I like. I don't mind that they're trying to incorporate the movie stuff, because if you're getting more readers because of the movies, of course you want them to relate to the characters. But they didn't do the total shift, even though I like Harley Quinn as that Deadpool-y character, that anti-hero. I was reading some of those Harley Quinn books, and I actually enjoyed those. But the art in this, like I said, is it brings a unique twist to what is already out there.
Hey, Doc.
Yeah.
We seem to have somebody join the call.
We did, and I believe our guest is here.
Yay! Awesome. Well, that's a good time to switch books.
Well, we'll switch in a second. Let me finish with the Matrix. The story element of this wasn't bad either. It was different from what I saw with the stories just coming off. Even if I don't know the heroes, they're killing them off. And the lettering was really well done too. So on that Matrix of 3, Brian, can you hear me?
I can hear you fine. Can you hear me?
I can hear you great.
I can hear you.
Cool. I'm shutting down unnecessary internet. That's happening because I'm on Wi-Fi, so it can get dicey sometimes. Okay, I think we should be good.
And just to warn you, I'm at Comic-Con today, so there might be a little background noise.
So yeah,
it's all good, man. No problem at all.
Well, and perfect timing, because we were just about to switch over to the comic, your comic. So we'll translate it into the What If X-Men #1.
Yeah.
Right on.
So I gotta say, sir, I like this book. I usually do the intro of the book, and this is essentially, like, for anyone who's not familiar with What If, it's basically kind of Marvel's version of Elseworlds. But they take a premise in one of their stories, and then it's like, well, what if we did it differently? What if some event happened differently? And there's certain tropes with what ifs where usually they rush the story very quickly to get to the meat of it. You seem to, I really like how you handle the book, because in this case, it's like, what if the X-Men was in the Matrix, essentially? And I really liked how you handled it, where it was the typical tropes of, the what if stories where some things were kind of rushed and you kind of get to the point really fast, but it didn't feel all rushed like they usually do. And you actually got into kind of a actual story here. And the idea of the X gene as EXE as an execute, I like that. I really like that idea. That was very clever. And you had a hell of a twist at the end, I will say.
Cool. Well, thank you. I mean, I do these drips and drabs of Marvel work, right? Most of the time I'm doing DC stuff, but I'm not exclusive, so I can kind of work anywhere. Sure. And I have a couple friends that are Marvel editors, so they'll check in with me about this or about that. And when they came to me about this what if, the problem I have with what ifs is a lot of times they feel like a joke. I don't mean like they're not well done. I just mean like it's a setup and a punchline, right? And that's kind of all fair. It is. And I wasn't really interested in doing that, but I talked to my friend Chris Robinson, who was my editor on this one, and I'm a big fan of Cyberpunk and Ghost in the Shell, Mamoru Oshii, and Masamune Shirow and all that stuff. So I'm like, well, what if we do something that's like set in that thing? So instead of like, what if Gwen Stacy became the Hulk, right? Instead of Gwen Hulk, we do, something like where we kind of set this world up with this idea and we'll have a story. And if people like it, maybe we can go back to it later on or whatever it is and do something. And he was cool with that idea. And that's kind of where that all came about.
Please do more.
Well, I think the reception's been pretty good. And I got to circle back and talk to Marvel about it. I try not to do too many things because I want everything to be pretty good. So the first thing is I got to finish my Killmonger miniseries before I would pick up a new thing. Because I'm also working on Titans, right? So, yeah, and TV schedules, that's a 9 to 5. I mean, that could be a 9 to 9, depending on the day, right? So you're Monday through Friday doing all of that. And then you have a little bit of time to do other stuff, and I got some screenwriting I got to do, so I got to be a little judicious about my time. But yeah, I think once I get these Killmonger scripts all in, because that's just a mini, then I think it'd be something that I wouldn't mind doing a little bit more of. I think people, from what I can tell on Twitter, people seem to be liking it enough to maybe see a little bit more of that world.
Well, the thing about, like, can we talk about this? Where like for me personally, I kind of feel a little bit burned out on Marvel and DC just from the standpoint of like there aren't really any stakes, because once the characters become a valuable commodity, you can't kill them or they can't stay dead, and after a while it just kind of it's hard to get invested in a story that has that problem. And when you do these alternate universe, like you had the Spider-Gwen universe, and you had like Spider-Man's daughter, Spider-Girl, and then you go like Age of Apocalypse, and when they get into or like Earth 2, like with DC, you get into these alternate universes and you can do whatever you want because you're not tied down to the bottom line of the company, and the stories can go in some excellent places, and suddenly you feel invested again. And you had done it in such a unique way that I'm like, I love this. This is brilliant. I kind of wanted to borrow some of those ideas for my own Cyberpunk book, actually.
Well, feel free.
Yeah.
I hear what you're saying. Like when I was growing up and I was reading a lot of books, I read monthly continuity stuff. But the stuff I really loved were like the Arkham Asylums and the Batman Year Ones. Yeah. Like the Frank Miller Wolverine miniseries, like stuff like that, right? Where things could happen because they were either sort of in continuity and on like the outer rim of it, or they just weren't continuity at all. And a lot of the things that we have that have been brought into continuity came from things that were totally outside of continuity, right? Mm-hmm. Like, like when Morrison and McKean did with the Joker in Arkham Asylum, that stuff got dealt into the Joker afterwards. But then that was just their incarnation of that character, right? And you can see how it's all over Heath Ledger's performance in Dark Knight, how there's all this stuff. and that's the thing that I miss about modern comics now, is that everything is always in continuity. The Black Label stuff is pretty cool. We'll see how that line goes. Hopefully it'll do well and weather the storm of genitals being revealed. And like
we talked about that.
Did you? Right on.
Yeah.
Like I hope that sets a stage for more storytellers to be able to do things like White Knight, like Batman Damned, but not just with Batman, right? With like other characters, because what you're talking about is important, I think, for the continuity too, right? Because if you see writers do things outside the continuity that take some risks and choices are made, then within the actual continuity you can reflect some of those things if you want to or not, right? So yeah, I hope they do. I don't know how big two business guys think, but I think it'd be great if we just had more miniseries that were just outside of it, but explorations of a character and seeing where it could go.
Yeah.
So give me 1 second, because I feel like a terrible host, because we just jumped right into this. The voice you're hearing, the disembodied voice, is Brian Edward Hill. He was the writer of the What
Yes,
If X-Men.
I'm broadcasting from the astral plane.
So I just wanted to clarify that, because we just kind of jumped in, and I dropped my ball on my only duty here. All right, I'll let you two to continue.
Hey, I have a question off topic though. So you're working on the Titans series for the streaming service?
I am.
Are you the one responsible for the F Batman line?
No, it's funny. No.
Okay.
I believe. Gosh, I don't. I think
that
line. Yeah, I think that line was in the pilot when I came on board the show. I frankly had forgotten it, right? Because you're just sort of focused on the last battle you fought.
Sure.
Here's a little funny story. So when that trailer came out, the first issue or the first or second issue, I think, of my Detective Comics run hit right around the same time.
Okay.
So I wake up, I check Twitter over coffee, which is how I normally check Twitter. It's how I wake up, because between the caffeine and people telling me how awful I am, that usually gets the adrenaline going, and then you can wake up. So I wake up, I go to Twitter, and I've got all these notifications with hashtag F Batman, F Batman, F Batman, F Batman, F Batman, right? I'm thinking, man, what did I do in that last issue of Detective? I'm like, he was going after a bad guy. He was driving a Ferrari. They can't be that mad about a Ferrari. So I'm like going back into my issue, looking for where I did the horrible thing with Batman, right? And I can't find it, and I'm really vexed because I don't think I did anything wrong. So I have no idea how not to do it again, right? I'm like in a whole thing about it. And I just happened to notifications kept going, right? And I saw one of them that linked to the trailer, and I watched the trailer, and I was like, oh, because a lot of people know I work on Titans, and they sent me this trailer, and that's what that's about. They're not mad at me because of the comic. But I really thought that like people had something about Batman driving a Ferrari that just drove them up a wall. Like they just could not handle that, right?
I'm freaking dying over here. That's hilarious.
Doc, you be okay over there?
Oh my god! Because I can see myself doing something like that. Like, right? I don't understand why everybody's mad. Like, what did I do?
Because things happen, man. Like in the game of comics, you will do those things that will just get people really furious with you, right? Like it happens a lot. But usually, you sort of know when that can happen. You're gonna kill a dude or do a thing or say a thing. And I just didn't have any idea what could have triggered the entire Batman fan community. So I was like, I don't know what I did. I was really glad it was the show and it wasn't my book.
They're obviously trying to, and I kind of wonder if if basically somebody said, let's do that because it'll get people talking about the show. And because it is a bit of a departure from the classic, what people expect in the Teen Titans, and because it does seem like an edgier show. It's not. I mean, it looks like it's not pushing the fun factor as much as past iterations have, and something like that to drop that in the trailer, people are going to talk about your show, and they're at least going to tune in for the first episode because you created the controversy.
Yeah, I don't know what the intention was really behind it, because when you work on a show, a lot of times the pilot's written before you show up.
Yeah.
So I know that our show is I think it has a lot of fun in it. I maybe the marketing isn't leading with the fun, as marketing is wont to do, right? But I do think that there's a lot of interplay, and there's dark moments, but there's some bright moments too, and I think it's pretty well balanced. But I imagine a lot of the marketing team decided that, well, this is how we're going to cut through the white noise of comic book adaptations and get people to pay attention.
Yeah, no, it's working.
Yeah, it seems to be working, right?
Yeah, it totally is working. I mean, a lot of people are going to be watching that. But, that's the other thing is you're probably going to be judged on the basis of the pilot. And they'll see the pilot, and that'll, like, the guys that review it, like Comic Pod, Comic Storian, all, they're going to be reviewing this and talking about it. Like, I mean, I hope the pilot's good so that they can see what your work is,
Yeah, well, I think it's pretty good. Like, I've gotten some feedback online from people, and it's been generally pretty positive. But, when you're working on a comic book, you get some feedback, but you don't get like hundreds and thousands and all that, right? You're dealing with like maybe 30, 35 people, in general will give you something, and maybe you get like depending on what you're working on, you get anywhere between like 7 to 25 or so reviews, of a book. You go to Comic Book Roundup, whatever. So it's manageable. I can read every review. I can respond to most people on Twitter. And I do keep the criticism in consideration. When you're working on a show, you're exposed to so many people. You're getting so much feedback. It gets a little out of hand to even really engage it at first. So I just kind of like check in general to see how mad the world is at me. And if they're not that mad, then I just keep going,
Well, I mean, the mad people are the vocal minority. Like, the majority of people, like myself, will just tune in and watch a show or not. They'll enjoy it, but they don't necessarily comment on the enjoyment of it. Whereas people that are angry are likely to be very loud about their anger, but they don't necessarily the majority.
Well, and people go out of their way to be angry. I mean, let's just get honest. There's people out there that try to make a profession out of it, and they will go and try to find something to be mad about, which drowns out the people that are legitimately trying to give you criticism. So kudos to you for trying to hunt down the actual criticism.
Well, yeah. If someone is just, just working inside the outrage economy, look, and I got nothing against it. Listen, like, if you can make a buck, doing that, go ahead and make your buck. If yelling about Brian Hill can help you pay your rent, go on and yell. But I don't get much from it. Right, like like if I log on to YouTube and there's some guy complaining about me and I'm this and I'm that and the rest of it, there's not much I can get from that to expand my writing ability. So I don't engage it. But when criticism is thoughtful, like there was a guy that was a guy named Jeremy Daw who was pretty critical of my Michael Cray work I was doing, but it was thoughtful criticism. And sometimes criticism confirms things you feel, too, right? Like, you do a thing, you're on deadline, you're putting something together, you can't hold up the train because you're not happy with this aspect or that aspect. But then if you read some criticism that echoes what you felt, it confirms your instincts. So when you keep going, you're like, okay, I do need to address that. I was right about that instinct. I'm not the only one who had that impression, so that's worth drilling back down into and doing it. So when criticism is like that, I certainly take. I got a pretty thick skin, so it's hard to put me in a bad mood because someone didn't like something I made up. So yeah, I try to engage as much of it as I can.
I realize I should probably ask a couple of questions later to the comic book we're reviewing.
My bad. Oh, hey man, it's your show, man. Your show, your rules, bro. Like.
Don't let him fool you. Do not let Woody fool you. We never stay on topic. It is one of our pinnacle things. Before you get into the comic book thing, I have to ask, because we've noticed that there's a correlation between two things. As a writer of comic books, I have to ask, how much tabletop RPGs do you play?
Oh, man. Like, not a lot recently. Like, when I was a kid, I used to mess around a little bit. But I don't have the time. So Matt Hawkins, the guy that runs Top Cow, he's also a writer. He worked with me on Postal for a while, and he does stuff over there. He had a game going, and it was Matt, Dan Wickline, also a writer, myself, and a couple other people, and it was over here in LA. It was kind of like around Burbank or wherever, and it was in a comic book shop somewhere. I should know the name of the comic book shop, but I don't. I apologize to those guys. But it was all day. Like, you know, I hadn't done it in a long time and went to do a game, and it was like 5 hours. and I told Matt, I was like, I don't have this kind of time to do that. Like, it was fun, but that time I could be writing or sleeping or procrastinating. You know, the things you do. And so I couldn't do it. I mean, I know that there are a lot of pros that do. You know, they do a lot of different tabletop games. Ryan Cady is a big tabletop game guy. He's a writer as well. He's got a book called Infinite Dark that's out there that's great. People should pick that up. I know Jody Hauser and company. You know, they do that stuff. And, like, you got the whole Critical Role deal that's happening, too. But, yeah. Usually my gaming time now is spent with a controller in my hand.
I have found the experience running games very valuable for improving my ability to write and tell stories. And so I do it on that basis. But my actual question that I wanted to ask, so you had like hundreds of X-Men characters to focus on in your story, right?
Yeah.
And at the end, we kind of teased what the next, phase of the story is going to be. But it was basically about, Magneto, Professor X, Domino, and Cable, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, obviously, Magneto and Professor X have to be there because it's an X-Men story, duh.
Right.
But, like,
for sure.
Why choose Cable and Domino? Was it because of Deadpool 2, or was that an editorial decision, or was that something that you were interested in?
Well, we just kind of sort of talked about it. I think the setting of the story, I wanted characters that kind of felt in that Ghost in the Shell vibe. Mm-hmm. So when you put Cable and Domino next to each other, you get a little bit of like Motoko Kusanagi and Bato, right? Like it's like visually it kind of looks like that. And that's really what I keyed into was like, oh, we can do like a cool Mamoru Oshii nod if we use these characters. And I think because of Deadpool, it was easy to get that through the system, right?
Yeah. I like the choice of the cybernetic eye and using that to represent her black spot.
Mm-hmm.
It really thematically worked.
That was all editorial. Chris had some ideas about that design stuff that was great, and I didn't write the back matter. I forgot the name of the guy who wrote the back matter, but it's not me. It is another writer. So I don't want to take credit for that stuff. So that fleshing out of those other characters and all that was someone else that came and did that work for us.
Okay.
We talked early on about Giannis because I love his work. And I wanted to work with him, but I wanted to do something that kind of fit his style. And it just happened to kind of line up because I've been studying manga. I'm not a huge manga guy. There's a couple manga I really like. I like Tsutomu Nihei's work, so Blame, Biomega. Those things are very much my wheelhouse. Blade of the Immortal, I've been a big fan of for a very long time. Lone Wolf and Cub. But lately, I've been trying to incorporate some of the visceral visual storytelling aspects of manga into my work. See, I came out of screenwriting. I grew up reading comics and wanting to write comics and all that, but I was a professional screenwriter before I started writing comic books. And when I started writing books, I was illustrating, I wasn't doing the art, but I was writing kind of like an illustrated script in a way, right? Like it was interesting to me, but it was a lot of like talking heads and, not the most visually dynamic stuff. Mm-hmm. So over time, what I've tried to do is push my visual storytelling a little forward. So when Marvel and I talked about this X-Men book, and then we talked about Giannis, I'm like, well, that's great because he has kind of this natural sort of manga-like style.
Yeah.
And then we can do a kind of a bracketing thing, and create like the kind of the real world around the manga-like style in the middle, and then when the manga stuff hits, we'll just start pushing forward with visuals and and doing that kind of thing. So a bunch of different things managed to come together at the same time while I was working on that thing. But even in the upcoming Batman and the Outsiders, you're going to see me do more of that kind of image-first storytelling in that book too. Right on.
Hey Doc, how are we doing on time?
I don't care. Keep asking questions.
I got like a little bit. I got about 5, 10 more minutes, and then I got to bounce.
Okay, cool. Yeah, because I also have to get back to our booth, and my girlfriend's on her way here, so I don't want to be away too long.
Right.
We usually go about a half an hour, but you're the first guest we managed to snag. So,
right on. I love being the inaugural guest. Love it.
Yeah. Well, and it's been awesome. I got to say, it's not because people had just been ignoring us. I've been really impressed because I come from. I ran a podcast for years doing tabletop games. And then when Woody asked me to do this, because I've done online streaming before, I was like, yeah, I'll jump in. We'll have some fun with this. And I got into this side of things, and I was so incredibly at awe that anybody I asked to come out for this, legitimately, if they couldn't make it, they responded and just said, can't. I haven't had anybody be like, no, I'm not going to do it, or ignore me. I've just been really impressed on that. And there's a lot of love there, and I can feel it, and I appreciate that. That is one of the coolest things.
Well, people are cool, man. Like, it's, I'm still learning and meeting people inside of comics, because I write a lot of them, but I don't go to a lot of shows because of my schedule. It's hard if you're working on TV, to find the time to go for a weekend, whatever. Like, I couldn't go to New York because going to a show is losing a week, essentially, right? Like, the preparation for the show, being at the show, and then, like, the couple days recuperation. And I've got so many different things going on that I can't really do that. So I'm still meeting comic pros. You might see me talk to a bunch of people on Twitter, but I've met in person maybe 5% of the pros that I talk to,
Right.
But in general, I found them to be a pretty friendly bunch, and I think everyone recognizes that if you're lucky enough that people would like to talk to you about your work, then you should do that. Right? Like, that's kind of it's a cool thing. Not everyone gets that experience to have someone check in and say, hey, I like your work, I want to talk to you about it. So, by and large, I think people are pretty friendly and open. And this stuff matters. Like, it's, the podcasts and the things that readers and fans choose to seek out, those things matter a lot more, I think, than the blitzkrieg of, like, top-down advertising. Like, in something like comics, a peer-to-peer recommendation is everything. Like, someone will buy something and start following a book because a friend of theirs said it was cool. Much more so than, like, walking past some big billboard or whatever of seeing a thing. Like, I don't think that influences the reading decision. I think people tend to trust real readers' opinions more than, like, what they'll see on a Rama, or Bleeding Cool or whatever. Like, I got no problem with those sites, but I think that when you can hear that's an authentic response from an authentic person, it makes a big difference.
Well, the way I found your book, actually, is there was I was out with my girlfriend, and we just walked into this. We were grabbing lunch, and there was a comic shop nearby in Renton, Washington, where we were.
Oh, right on.
I walked in, and I just was looking around because, like, I don't want to necessarily go in somewhere and not buy anything, right?
Oh, I know. It's the pressure, right? It's like, as soon as you walk into the store, you're like, I got to buy something.
And what I was actually going in there for was I was looking for old issues of Wizard and, like, the kind of like the previews mags, because I wanted to rip them apart and use them for our button machine at our show coming up, right, which is today. And so I was looking around for something to buy, and I saw it on the shelf, and it was like, what is that? Yeah. And I just kind of, I looked in, I flipped, I couldn't entirely tell what was going on from just flipping through it. Because, again, unlike a regular What If book, there isn't, like, the immediate, oh, well, this changed, so this is the story. And you're like, oh, I remember that. Okay, I know what this is. It was something, it was, like, literally an original story. But I was flipping through, I was like, this looks like cyberspace. Oh, hell yeah, I don't remember if I bought it in this. I don't think I got the hard copy because I realized I wanted this on our show. So, and we have to do digital for the show.
Sure.
So, I made sure to get the digital, and I wasn't disappointed. It was a fun story, and my only complaint is I wish there had been more. And there were a few things, obviously, in the What If environment, you can't explain everything as thoroughly. So you can't just jump in. And they did leave me with a couple of questions, but you excuse them because it's a What If book, and obviously it would have been a little more thorough if you'd had a whole series run, and I hope you get a chance to do the series.
I would totally
like
the good old Comic-Con connection right there.
To do a miniseries, yeah.
Well, yeah, I'd very much like to do a miniseries. Talking about, like, tabletop games. What I do a lot of is pick up the source books because they help me out with world building and world framing and the rest of it. So for something like the What If X-Men, there's a lot of that thought that was done. I didn't write the back matter portions, but I did design the world a little bit in my head, and I have some things, there. So generally, if you see a story from me, there's a lot more there that I could access if I had the opportunity to do so. It's really surprising to me that there's not a big cyberpunk book that comes out every month. That's like it's kind of a gap. If you look at especially with Marvel or DC, no one's really in that space. Image has a few things that deal with cyberspace, but nothing that feels like that classic Mike Pondsmith, kind of cyberpunk thing. I'm shocked that we don't really have a monthly book that is that book. So it felt like a good space to work in, and still feels like a good space to work in.
Well, there's actually kind of a lost opportunity in the industry, because you're probably familiar with Shadowrun from your
sure yeah.
So Shadowrun, it turns out Shadowrun's owned by Topps, and because from what I've gathered from talking to people and doing my own research, that because Topps have basically flopped in the comic book industry in the 90s, they won't touch comic books, and they want somebody to come in and basically pay a fat licensing fee and guarantee circulation to get the Shadowrun license, and it's available. Any company could snag it up, right? What the hell? Could snag it up right now, but they want at least $20,000 for licensing. They want to guarantee all these guarantees, and it's but clearly it's not seen as like a valuable thing, or somebody would have picked it up, or they just don't know. But it's Shadowrun's basically a license to print money, and
that's interesting, man. I'll look into that because I have been picking up some licensed stuff lately. Can't really go into it, but I've been working out some deals because it's at some point you just stop waiting for some company to do it, and you just go try to negotiate it yourself. I just have my lawyer reach out, we try to cut a deal and get it done. So that's cool. I didn't know that. I assumed that Shadowrun had been locked up somewhere and whatever.
It's not locked up. Well, see what had happened is I was writing a cyberpunk story, and I'm currently producing my own as an indie book. I'm in the middle of chapter 4, and it's rolling along fine, and it's very popular, and people pick it up, and I sell tons of them at cons. But I had attempted to approach Catalyst Games to see if maybe, because I had been told that they had the rights to the comics, and I thought, hey, let's maybe I could just take my story and put it into the Shadowrun universe. And it turns out that Catalyst doesn't even control the comic book rights. Topps has it completely locked up, and they will not allow Catalyst to develop the book, even though you could raise it in a day. You could raise enough money on Kickstarter to buy the franchise fee and produce the book, but without certain guarantees, it will be in every comic shop in the nation. They're just sitting on it.
That's really interesting.
Yeah. So if you do get that deal, you have to contact me because I want to write.
I will. I'll tell you what. You were the first person to know if I pick up those rights.
Because I would love to work on a Shadowrun comic series. I certainly did enough research while I was developing what I wanted to do, right? And I've even run the game a bit, and it's if you got a company to pick it up, this is one of the most successful cyberpunk, if not science fiction, brands in I was around, and it's completely just sitting there untouched.
Yeah.
So I don't mean to cut us off because it's been great, but I know you both have hard outs. You got to go back to Comic-Con. You got stuff going on.
Yeah, I got to get out here as well.
So thank you very much for joining us today, Brian. It was an honor to have you. Anytime you want to come promote something, just give us a heads up on it.
Right on. I'll let you guys know, man. Check in anytime. Appreciate you inviting me on.
Yep, and follow him on Twitter at Brian Edward Hill. He is very interactive with his crowd, which is awesome to see.
I procrastinate quite often. All right, fellas. Have a good day.
Have a good
one. I'll talk
one.
to you guys soon. Cheers.
Yeah. Well, that was fun.
That was awesome. I'm so glad he came out. For everybody else, we went over 10 minutes. I do apologize. I hope you all enjoyed it. We'll do a real quick final thoughts thing, and then we'll get out of here. What are your final thoughts on R2 for today?
Well, the DC book, Heroes in Crisis, really well-written book. I can easily recommend it. I call it a 4 out of 5. I don't know that I'm going to pick it up, but it's one of the most well-written comic books I've read in a long time. As far as the X-Men book, I mean, it was just pure fun to read that, and I love a book where it's outside of continuity and there are stakes, and you actually can get invested in the story, and that's a 5 out of 5 book for me, and I cannot recommend it more highly. I'm definitely hope there's more coming.
So, Heroes in Crisis, I 100% agree. I thought it was very unique. It was a good way to start a story, and I could find very few things about it that were not interesting. The art is actually really well done if you like DC art. Me personally, not jumping straight into it, I might pick up a couple issues from here just to see what they're going to do with that. What If X-Men 1? I enjoyed it immensely. I didn't talk about my dynamics, but I just wanted to give our guests a chance to talk. So real quick, the art is interesting. I think in certain spots the art was really well done, and in other spots it was supposed to have a different look to it.
It definitely was.
It didn't jump out at me, but it really did. I will say that the art, you could see the transition with the art really well, what was going on. It made the story easy to follow. The lettering was really well done. It was just basic. It wasn't anything that jumped out. There wasn't anything crazy about it, but it was really easy to follow and see what was going on. It actually helped translate parts of the story as well, with the way they were doing the lettering. And the storyline, I not just because he was a guest, I wish he could hear this. If he hears this later, that's fine. I thought it was really well done, and you know me, I say stop beating on the X-Men, let it go. This one I would read. This one I would continue to read. Very easy, very hands down. But we are over. I want to appreciate everybody's time. Thank you for joining us today. We're a couple people in chat. We do appreciate you having out here. And always, read more comics, keep it nerdy, and live your dreams.